Thank you so much for having me this morning. I'm going to ask if you would briefly pray with me. God, I ask that the words that come out of my mouth will be full of your spirit. I ask that the words that are spoken will touch the hearts and souls of those present, and that at the end of the day, your will will be done. Thank you for this space. I thank you for this congregation. All these things, we lift up in Jesus' name. Amen. So Jan told me that this summer you are exploring a Celtic theme and navigating nature and the symbolism within the scripture. And so I'm going to also do the same thing within this text. So if you don't mind bearing with me for a few, I would like to speak from the title of Be Where the Wild Things Are. So just a little bit about me. I come from the African Methodist Episcopal tradition, the AME Church. And back home, my pastor used to say, if the sermon is speaking to you, feel free to speak back. So I extend that same invitation to you this morning. So I know the scripture reading focuses on Ishmael and Ishmael's suffering and God hearing Ishmael's crying. But one of the voices that we hear very strongly in the text is that of Hagar. And so I'm going to navigate this through Hagar's perspective of her suffering. So this part of the story starts with Ishmael being celebrated for being weaned. Sarah saw the laughter and the joy coming from Ishmael, and it angered her. It angered her to the point that she demanded that Abraham banish them from the camp and cast them into the wilderness. And although upset, Abraham follows her request because God says that Ishmael will be all right. Now, we don't know exactly how Sarah and Abraham obtained Hagar as a servant, but what is clear from this story was that she was never safe. She went from living in a space where her obedience to Sarah and Abraham led to her being cast into a space that's notoriously known for death and suffering, the wilderness. And so it's here that we meet Hagar in the wilderness with Ishmael, only holding a flask of water and bread. Nowhere to go, no sense of direction, but forced into the dry desert wilderness. We hear Hagar's cry to God because she can no longer survive in the wilderness and cannot bear to witness the death of Ishmael as a result of this oppressive sentence and this hate-filled tragedy. She's crying out because this loss has become just too much for her to bear. And then God listens and responds to the cry of the child. It is in this place labeled as a space for suffering and death that God responds to Hagar's tragedy and turbulent state with safety, comfort, and a promise of life. Verses 18 to 20 state, "Get up, pick up the boy, take him by the hand, because I will make of him a great nation." And then God opened her eyes, and she saw well. She went over, filled the water flask, and gave the boy a drink. And God remained with the boy. Hagar was not expecting to find life in this wilderness. The very same space she was exiled to with the intention of suffering and death became a space for new life and renewal to occur. During her pain, her grief, her anger, disappointment, confusion, and hopelessness, God opened her eyes. And he provided her with the means to sustain life and go on to live a new life. Some of us are in a turbulent place too. We are in places that society proclaims to be safe, or we're supposed to be celebrating joyous life occasions, but however, we're filled with great sorrow. These spaces have now become the wilderness, and we feel like we are dying. We're struggling to cope with the immense loss and tragedy we've endured. We're struggling to be encouraged as we witness systems continually strip us of our humanity. We're heartbroken for the loss of life and safety for our children. We are disappointed and we feel powerless to stop this suffering and tragedy from occurring. But then God steps in and hears our cry. God utilizes the wilderness that holds the trauma of our suffering to become the liberation that we need. Just like God provided the living water for Hagar to survive, God will provide the resources that we need to survive also. But the story gets better. Not only does God provide the resources to sustain life for Hagar and Ishmael, God additionally promises that new life will come for both of them in this time of the wilderness. Hagar's suffering will give way to her overcoming. She is promised that they will walk out of the wilderness and Ishmael will lead a great nation. God is promising to provide new life in the very same places that we're suffering. The living water may appear differently, but it will replenish and renew just as it did for Hagar. Sometimes we will find death and suffering in spaces that should protect life. And guess what? Sometimes we find life in the wilderness where we've been told we will not survive. So do not fear the wilderness, because suffering and tragedy do not get the final say in what God has intended for your life. I am here to tell you not to be discouraged by the evil attempts made by others to kill your humanity, your joy, your rights, your courage, your resistance, and your ability to love. The thing about sending others into unknown territory with the intention of suffering is that there are unknown sources that provide life sent from God in those unknown territories too. Just like the living water from the well was provided for Hagar, God provides for us. Matter of fact, God will use us as the wells of living water in the midst of someone else's wilderness. So that requires some things of us. That means we need to be present to the wilderness that's in front of us. We can't turn a blind eye to the suffering of others and expect for a miracle to happen to bring about peace. It is in these moments that God will send and use us as a drink of that living water to be the love that somebody needs when they believe they have none, to be the resistance that somebody needs when they're losing strength, the voice to call out suffering and injustice when voices are being silenced, the comfort that someone craves when life becomes just too much, the mourner that laments grief for the person overwhelmed in loss, and the encouragement when suffering is beating down on our faith. You see, we are the living water sometimes in the midst of that wilderness. And while God promises Hagar that her son would lead a great nation, the bigger promise was that the intentional suffering placed on her would not kill her and Ishmael. When evil people and things intentionally try to set us up for suffering and death in the wilderness, God provides this living water to ensure that we will live in mastery of the unknown. We are to be encouraged and renewed in our faith to know that we can live and thrive in the wilderness. Nothing scares evil more than seeing life prevail where it was intended to die. I'm going to say that again. Nothing scares evil more than seeing life prevail where it was intended to die. When the spirit of those we have lost continue to live and breathe life into those who are still here and those still navigating their wilderness, evil becomes scared. When people are forced to live in the streets and struggle to make a way due to capitalism and systemic poverty, but others provide means of survival from that well and fight for laws and resources to restore their livelihood, evil becomes scared. When families seeking safety, survival, and opportunity are detained, ripped apart from each other, killed, and mistreated, but hundreds of voices and bodies rise up out of these wells to resist the denial of human rights and demand justice, evil becomes scared.
Amen.
When policies of racism, homophobia, transphobia, xenophobia, anti-Semitism, bullying, and other forms of discrimination are dismantled by the protection and solidarities of those who stand up and bear witness, evil becomes scared. See, Sarah demanded Hagar's exile out of the fear that she would lose power. But what she intended as harm became the greatest good for Ishmael and Hagar. Evil seeks to create fear, but love seeks to create life and liberation. Every time we allow God to use us as vessels of water and love in the midst of fear and evil, life and liberation prevails. It is in this faith that we can depend on God when we find ourselves ejected into the wilderness. And I can't tell you specifically how God is going to answer you or promise you, but what I can tell you is that God will not allow you to die. No, with God you will live. God will place those wells in your life to show you how to overcome your suffering. And once you have overcome, God will use you as a well in the life of someone else in the midst of their wilderness too. So do not give up in your wilderness. Do not feel powerless to evil and tragedy that is falling into your life. God hears the cries of her children and is setting you up to live. Look for the wells of water in your life. Receive the help that you deserve to have. Know that you are not alone in your suffering, and this wilderness will not be your death. So be where the wild things are. Be in the wilderness. Be the living water, and be encouraged in knowing that in your times of suffering, there will be water for you. Amen. Amen.